Hi, everyone. We will give folks a couple seconds oh, I'm spotlighted. Okay. Give folks hello, that's me on the spotlight. Give folks a couple seconds to join. Deirdre, do you have others? Should we give me the nod when you think I should just go for it? This is the nod. Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Vermont Creative Network's 2026 Legislative Preview. My name is Susan Evans McClure. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. I'll invite all of you to put your name in the chat and your organization, if you're with an organization, maybe the town you're coming from, so we can just get a sense of who is in the room with us today. Today's webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll share this on our website after the event. The webinar is also being captioned by live white coat captioning. And to view the captions in the Zoom window, click on the captions button at the bottom of your screen. Captions can be viewed through your browser at the link in the chat, which Deirdre is going to put in the comment. Oh, she's already done it. It's in the chat. So the Vermont Arts Council is proud to be the backbone organization for the Vermont Creative Network, a statewide coalition of nonprofits, businesses, and individuals all working to advance Vermont's creative sector. The Vermont Creative Network is also our state's leader in creative sector advocacy. We support policies and public funding that advance the creative sector, which in turn advances Vermont's overall economy and community well-being. And when we say creative sector, what we're really talking about are all of the industries, businesses, organizations, and individuals for whom creativity is at the heart of their work. We're putting creativity squarely at the intersection of economic development and community development, and we thank you all for being part of that. Today is the second rescheduled, was supposed to be in person, but we live in Vermont and deal with weather, so now we're on the magic of Zoom. So today is the second in a three-part series of events this fall focused on advocacy. I hope you'll join us in person for the final event in the series tomorrow at the Chandler in Randolph for a workshop encouraging creative sector folks to get involved in Vermont's political landscape at every level. More information on tomorrow's event, and it's not too late to register, you can still come, is at the link that Deirdre just put into the chat as well. I'm thrilled to be joined today by a great lineup of folks who are going to be sharing insights into the upcoming legislative session and the world we're navigating. I'm joined today by Christopher Kaufman Ilstrup, Executive Director of Vermont Humanities, Patti Komline, Director of Government Affairs at Downs Rachlin Martin, Steve Perkins, the Executive Director of the Vermont Historical Society, and Morgan Nichols from Representative Becca Balint's team. And as we're getting into December and thinking about wrapping up 2025, I do think it's worth saying that this has been quite a year that we're almost through. Thank you all for continuing to focus on the vital work that you do and the work that the creative sector makes possible all across Vermont. I've been so inspired by your steadfast belief in what we do, even as we're navigating some choppy federal waters. And speaking of federal waters, I will share that the Vermont Arts Council did receive our National Endowment for the Arts and State of Vermont funding for the fiscal year that we are in right now. Our grants and programs are moving ahead, and you can learn more on our website about all of the things that are still open and things that have been funded so far this year. We've also had significant private support that's allowing us to expand our work in new ways, and we're really grateful for the way that the community has come together to support the arts across the state. It does seem like the National Endowment for the Arts will be funded in the FY26 budget that's being developed right now. There was some back and forth. There'll be some back and forth before it fully gets there, but we are hoping for a best case scenario of level funding. And the National Endowment for the Arts continues to operate with an acting chair who maybe by the time people are watching this recording will be a confirmed chair of the NEA. We have had some really great support from their staff continuing as well. And as things continue to change, we're tracking things closely, and we're always happy to answer any questions that you have and help point you in any helpful directions that we can. But most importantly, we need you all to keep at it. Vermont can only stay strong if our communities are strong, and our creative sector is really at the heart of our communities. Your work really matters, and we appreciate everything that you're doing. And now I'm so pleased that we're joined today by Morgan Nichols, a wonderful friend of the creative sector in Vermont and the caseworker and community liaison for Vermont Representative Becca Balint. Morgan, I'll turn it over to you.
So much, Susan. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay. So thank you to the Vermont Creative Network for bringing us all together and for all that you do to support our creative culture here in Vermont. We couldn't do this work without you. My name is Morgan Nichols, and as Susan said, I'm a community liaison and caseworker for Congresswoman Balint. And in addition to the many issue areas that I cover, arts and culture is one of the issues that I'm very excited to have on my portfolio. As I shared before, this space is very near and dear to my heart as I was an art educator for 13 years, and I get to continue to keep one foot in this by connecting with you all and through my work leading the Congressional Art Competition. So thank you for continuing to welcome me as a fellow creative in this space. Before I continue, I'm excited to share that we will be sending out initial emails to all high school art educators and partners across the state in the next few weeks regarding the 2026 Congressional Art Competition. Last year, we had 100 students from 12 counties, and we want to continue to drive those numbers and support participation. If you have any questions on this, please don't hesitate to email me directly. I'll put that email in the chat once I'm finished. This year, we'll be hosting our event at VSU Johnson, which is really exciting. We are looking at the May 1st deadline, but we'll have more confirmation on that in the future. We are thrilled to be able to continue to work with partners to move this event around the state and hope that that will spur even more participation from Lamoille County and the NEK. So as many of you know, the Congresswoman cares very deeply about the arts. She is an artist herself in many respects, and she recognizes its critical importance in our ability to record our history, lift up our voices, foster community and connection, and help our individual ability to make sense of the world. And in these times, that is essential. Throughout this last year, the Congresswoman has enjoyed connecting with you and hearing about the great work that you all do. She has put out calls to action to ensure that our artists and writers continue to raise their voices, and she has used her own voice in town halls, community conversations, in the media, through letters and legislation, and even in her own writing to stand up for our democracy and for the funding that supports organizations like yours. We know that the road ahead is challenging and that funding is critical to our collective ability to continue a robust and equitable the robust and equitable programming that you are creating throughout the state. We are in that fight with you and are so grateful for all that you do to help us stay up to date of sign-ons and legislation and any critical updates and actions that are happening. As you can imagine, it is often very busy. It's a very busy time in DC. So we appreciate your partnership. And because you're often hearing about these things before we are, it's important that those lines of communication stay open. So we thank you for that. Our door is always open. You can reach out to our office. Happy to give you that phone number. It's 802-652-2450. Again, 802-652-2450. And there's no wrong door. If I'm not the right person that you need to speak to, we'll find the right person, but please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. And we look forward to the opportunities to connect with you in the new year. And again, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Morgan. We are so lucky in Vermont to have really significant support from our entire federal delegation for the arts, culture, humanities, civic life. I just feel really grateful for all of the folks that we get to work with and feel so supported by. So thank you, Morgan, for everything that you do. And now I'm happy to introduce Christopher Kaufman Ilstrup, who is the Executive Director of Vermont Humanities.
Thanks, Susan. It's great to be here with you all. I am so sorry that we missed the opportunity to be in person due to that slick road situation a couple weeks ago, but I'm glad to be here now. I'm going to spend just 1 or 2 minutes talking about the NEH situation and giving you the really quick update on that, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what our plans are for 2026 and beyond. As you know, the NEH had a somewhat different experience than the NEA in that DOJ did arrive in late March and terminated all grants issued from 2020 onwards, including all 56 state and jurisdictional humanities councils. We did file a lawsuit through the Federation of State Humanities Councils in District Court in Oregon in May of that year to attempt to reverse the terminations. 2 days after our oral arguments, a preliminary injunction was granted. That did not, however, restore our federal funding. It did not turn the funding back on. It did require NEH to hold the funding in abeyance and not spend it on other things like the Garden of Heroes, for example. We await the next stages of that court case. We expect that our attorneys are going to file for summary judgment sometime in February or March. This is somewhat delayed because of the federal government shutdown and the inability to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oregon. That said, it'll be a long time before we see any of our FY 2025 funding. And we're looking to Representative Balint and the congressional delegation to continue to work towards passage of the FY 26 budget. The current continuing resolution goes through January 30th. And we hope that there will be funding for the NEH in that budget. So that's my brief update on the federal situation for NEH. I want to say that here at Vermont Humanities, we've been really deeply moved by the support that the community has shown for us during this terrible time. We have managed to replace about half of the federal funding with emergency support from private donors. That has been terrific. And it's allowed us to continue doing probably about 80% of what our regular year would look like. I have our final board meeting of the year this afternoon where we will pass our FY 26 budget. And we are again planning to be at about 80% of capacity for 2026. We're going to keep our programming and our budget straightforward and simple. We are planning about 100 Speakers Bureau events, about 80 to 100 Vermont Reads programs, 10 fall festival events in the fall of 2026. Our Never Too Early trainings will continue for early educators. Vermont Early Literacy Initiative will continue for librarians. There'll be a Words in the Woods season next summer in Vermont State Parks. And perhaps what's most important in this situation is that we will continue to make grants in 2026. The first project grant deadline will be February 18th. We'll open up for new applications beginning in early January. Those are grants up to $5,000. The rapid response grants, the smaller grants of up to $1,000 will also continue. I believe that they are reopened as of December 1st for decisions that will be made in early January. So please feel free to visit our website, look at the grants page, and if you have a good project, apply for funding for next year. Our project and our rapid response grants will be level funded. We have completed the first cohort of our partnership grant program as of this week. That's our 3-year grant program. We hope to reopen for a new partnership grant cohort in the fall of 2026, but we're not entirely certain yet if that is going to happen. Please do keep an eye out on the website for that later on in the summer to see if we'll be offering a new 3-year grant program. Those are for grants up to $10,000. The first cohort, we had 8 grantees, and we were really grateful to the support of private donors that allowed us to fulfill all of our obligations to all of our grantees in 2025 and to plan for grant making going forward in 2026. I'm going to stop there and pass it back to Susan.
Great. Thanks so much, Christopher. And now I'd like to introduce Steve Perkins, the Executive Director of the Vermont Historical Society, to also share some updates. Steve, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Susan. And thank you for having me here today. So just a few updates on IMLS so we can hit all of the various federal buckets. So, as many of you have read, there is a nationwide injunction on IMLS that reinforces a partial injunction issued out of the Rhode Island courts last summer that allows museums and cultural organizations that have received grants or approved for grants prior to 2025 to continue to receive their funding. And so that's ongoing right now. That also means that IMLS block grants for libraries are also continuing. That's kind of backward looking. Looking forward, it looks like the only thing that'll continue at this point are the block grants to state libraries and the discretionary grants normally that go to museums. That program has mostly gone away, and the money has been redirected per where the administration wants it to go. So that's IMLS. So we're not planning on IMLS support for museums over the next couple of years, but hopefully something will change with that. Vermont Historical Society, we were affected by IMLS. Like I said, with an injunction, we are receiving some funds, but it's not a huge part of our budget. So we're very grateful to be in Vermont, where Vermont continues to support its museums, it supports history, it supports culture in the best way it can. And I got to say, it is really hard to be in the history and culture field, especially in museums right now in this country. And again, grateful to be in Vermont. Where we're provided the freedom to express ourselves in our institutions in meaningful ways and in ways that are true to our field and the ethics of our field and not influenced by what politics says we have to say and we have to do. That's a huge issue throughout this country. Vermont Historical Society going forward, I'm just going to talk about things that apply that people can participate in. We've got a lot of great stuff you can come see. Come see exhibits, buy our books, read articles, the journal, all that research we'll continue to do as we have done in the past. We have a number of education programs, especially around America 250. I know that's a fraught conversation of how do we talk about our country right now and what does it mean to think about 250 years of history? I argue, let's think about it. It's a time to talk about what does 250 years of U.S. history mean to us in that full sweep of history and where is it going? So we have educational programs that all communities can take part in. One is called All in Vermont, which will pair schools with local cultural organizations. So all of you on this call, that's an opportunity to work with your schools. There's a lot of information for that on our educational website, which is vermonthistoryexplorer.org. That site also is a clearinghouse for curriculum materials for schools, for homeschoolers, for students and parents who are looking to talk about history, especially local history. We focus on Vermont on that site. So that's vermonthistoryexplorer.org. If you're not involved in the League of Local Historical Societies and Small Museums, it's kind of a catch-all department of the Vermont Historical Society, which supports history and culture work at the local level. Please do. VermontHistory.org is our main website. You can find more information there. There's a directory on that site. We have listservs and we for people to participate in, and we offer online training, in-person training, an annual conference, and all sorts of activities for local groups that are working in the history and culture sphere. So please take a look at that, and we'll continue to work on that. We are grateful that we are continuing to receive these IMLS grants due to the injunction, and part of that is supporting another staff person with specific outreach work with small museums and local historical societies. And that will continue through this year. And thank you to some generous private donors who have backstopped that in case the funding does disappear. We will be able to continue that. 250th activities. We're doing a major project called 50 for 250, which looks at how artifacts tell stories, especially for people who don't have voices in the written record. And we've asked thinkers, writers, students from across the state to select artifacts from our collection and write about them. The essays are coming in now. So there'll be an exhibit and book and programming that'll debut next July for that. And then through the League of Local Historical Societies and Small Museums, we'll be working with those groups to provide materials on how they could do their own research and their own mini version of that if they don't already have 250th plans. And of course, supporting that, we did do grants last year, and we look forward to perhaps having some money in the future for grants around the 250th information. So please stay tuned for that information. I'll stop there. Thank you, Susan.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And I'll also direct folks to Vermont Humanities as well for if you're interested in learning more about funding to support 250th activities. There is future project grant funding and also just a real organization around the state through the Vermont's 250th Commission to really think holistically about how Vermonters are marking this important anniversary. So we've done some grounding, what is going on, all the things we're sorting through. Sometimes I feel like my head is spinning around in circles. I don't know how everybody else feels, but nowhere else I'd rather have my head spin around than Vermont. Deirdre, if you could put up the slideshow, we're going to change gears a little to talking about what is coming up in our next legislative session, which starts in just a few weeks in January. We're in the second year of the legislative biennium, and the Vermont Creative Network always has a real focus in the legislature around how we are looking to move policy forward in ways that will support the entire creative sector. Can you go to the next slide, please, Deirdre? So Vermont's creative sector really plays a crucial economic and community role in our small state. Arts and culture in 2023 created more than $1.2 billion for Vermont's overall economy. And we're about 3%, that makes us 3% of Vermont's GDP, gross state product, and over 10,000 jobs are in the arts and culture in Vermont. And in the 2024 Vermonter poll, 87% of respondents believe that the arts and culture help communities thrive. None of this is news to anyone on this webinar, but I think it's always important to go back to these numbers that really show us what we see every day, the amazing impact that the creative sector has both in our communities and our people and our understanding our humanity, and also in the dollars that are going into our communities. Can you go to the next slide, please? So when we were developing our advocacy goals for 2026, we knew that we really need to make the value and impact of our sector clear for everyone. So our focus in this coming legislative session will be on positioning the creative sector as part of the solution to the existing significant issues that we have here in the state. We know that the creative sector is playing a vital role in being part of the solution, and we want to make that visible for all of the decision makers in Montpelier so they can see the work that's happening in all of our communities. We're also going to be strengthening relationships with legislators while communicating the importance of the creative sector, even, and I think especially during uncertain federal times and the kind of national divisions that we're experiencing as well. Next slide, please. So how do we talk about all of that? Well, we always go back to our key framing that the arts and culture are foundational to solving the issues we're facing. And that means we're a key part of economic development with the amazing dollars that we're bringing to the state's economy overall. But we're also an important part of workforce development. When we invest in the creative sector, it both attracts workers to Vermont and keeps workers to Vermont. And also many of the in-demand jobs in Vermont really require creative thinking and in the way that learning through the arts and culture can really help you be prepared for. And also, the arts and culture are really about community connections. And we need those connected communities in order for Vermont to think about what comes next for us. How do we operate as a state in the face of this challenging federal funding landscape, especially in a state where our budget is so determined by federal funding? Vermont's creative industries are really what makes our state a place where people want to visit, they want to live, work, and really thrive. Next slide, please. So in addition to ongoing funding for Vermont's statewide cultural agencies, the Creative Network is focusing on two major legislative priorities this year. The first is working on a bill to regulate the online ticket resale market. In recent years, deceptive online ticket sales have really negatively affected Vermont consumers and small businesses. That's anything from fake websites to scam tickets, inflated prices online. They all deceive fans, they distort competition, and they saddle Vermont businesses with the damage when fans show up with fake or unusable tickets. I'm assuming that many of you, maybe on this call, have had this experience where you think you want to buy a ticket to something, you go to Google, and you come up on a website that looks exactly like the organization you think you want to see the show at. But as you dig a little deeper, it turns out that it's not. They're either selling tickets that don't exist, they're selling tickets at inflated prices. All of the things they're doing are not fair to consumers and they're not fair to arts organizations. So we're advocating that this bill, which is actually was introduced at the end of last session, we're advocating that the bill really include common sense regulations that protect consumers and small businesses and the Vermont economy. So we're looking for the bill to include a price cap on secondary market sales. It should not be allowed that someone buys a ticket for 50 bucks and then goes online and sells it for $2,000. That's just not fair. We're also advocating for a ban on deceptive websites. A website should not be allowed to use the logo of another organization without their permission. We want to create a registry for online ticket resellers. So if you are a company that resells tickets as part of your business model, you should have to register with the state to do business here. And we know that all of these regulations aren't going to stop all of this in its tracks because it's really a national and sometimes even international problem. So we are partnering with the Attorney General's office to do a consumer education campaign, really bringing together all of the performing arts venues across the state to make sure that people who are attending their events know what their rights are, know how to lodge a complaint, and are aware of what they should be looking for. We've been partnering with the Vermont Attorney General's office to propose what we really think should be in this bill because the work would be enforced by the Attorney General's office. Similar legislation passed in Maine last year, so we're working closely with partners there and around the country to ensure that Vermont's laws, as much as possible, align with other states. We know that state level legislation can only do so much on what is this kind of national issue, but we do want to make things better where we can and as much as we can for performing arts venues and ticket buyers. So many thanks to the folks who've come together around this. And if you'd like to know more or get involved, please reach out to me. We're also continuing to advocate for funding to support a film and creative media workforce development initiative. Vermont is one of the only states that does not fund its film industry at all. This is a very modest request to support an online database for film and creative media job opportunities and assets that would make filmmaking in Vermont easier and would support Vermont's economy. This has had a lot of support in previous years, but as we know and we hear a lot, the state budget is tight and hard decisions are being made about the best use of state funds. So we'll continue to tell the story of the way that this funding would really impact the film industry in Vermont and Vermont's overall economy. And we look forward to bringing both of these issues to the legislature because we know that what we're looking to do is make things better for Vermont's creative sector and better for all Vermonters who want to interact with the creative sector. And both of these opportunities would do that. Next slide, please, Deirdre. So coming up tomorrow, as we said, there is an event in Randolph, Vermont. We'd love for you to come to. Oh, I meant to confirm this date with Steve before we started this presentation. I believe it's January 16th in the legislature will be the League of Local Historical Societies Day. February 12th is going to be Creative Sector Day at the State House. We'll be sending out more information on that and how you can get involved. There's also other advocacy days at the State House that intersect with all of the work we do, including Nonprofit Advocacy Day, Downtown and Tourism Day. And then after, God willing, the legislature will not be in session June 5th. After the legislative session is over in June 5th, we'll be hosting the Vermont Creative Sector Convening event in St. Albans. So save the date for that, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. Next slide, please. So we really need all of you to be part of this work. And what can you do and how can you do it? The first, which sometimes feels like the simplest, but is really the most impactful, is getting to know your elected officials. You can look up your local and state elected officials on your town website and on the legislature's website. If you haven't visited the Vermont legislature's website, there is a lot on there. Kind of everything you would ever want to know about what happens is on there. You can look up who your legislators are, and then they really do want to hear from you. So please reach out, introduce yourself and your work. The second thing on your list should be inviting your elected officials to your programs. It's really crucial that you do this. We have the kind of luxury of our sector that we do amazing things that we get to invite people to, and your elected officials should be on that list. So gallery openings, museum events, performances, just reach out to them and let them know it's happening and that you would love for them to join. They may not always respond to your email, although we of course hope that they do, but continually reaching out and having them on your list is so important. And in fact, I was just talking to a legislator yesterday about this, and what she said was a reminder that Vermont's legislators don't have staff. They are offices of one, and that while it may feel like we are kind of bombarding them or begging them to come to stuff, her view is that she actually needs people to tell her stuff because that's how she finds out what's going on. So you're not bothering them. In fact, you're doing them a service and you're helping them out by letting them know what's happening in their districts. The third thing on the list should really be defining and getting comfortable with your organizational values. Understanding what values guide your work, the work of your organization, or you as a person, should and always will be the basis of all of your advocacy work. So understanding what those are and being able to go from there will help in any difficult conversations or anytime you have questions, being able to go back to that grounding. Number 4 on the list is, of course, getting involved. There are many ways to get involved, and figuring out what is the right way for you is an important step. Some of those might be through your jobs and through your roles. And the reality is there's a lot going on these days. And there are many ways for creative sector and nonprofit organizations to be part of building a better future for all of us. But we can't expect that our work roles are the only place that we are working to solve problems. So thinking about what your role is in your work and what your role is in your community, maybe outside of work, is important too. And of course, running for office is always on the list. You can learn more about that with us tomorrow at our workshop. But it is a really important way for people to have a seat at the table, is to get that darn seat at the table. So we need artists, arts organizations, creative thinkers, historians, teachers. We need folks to be in those elected roles, and that is where we'll make the most difference. So as I put in the chat, if folks have questions as we're moving forward, please drop them in the chat. We'll also have time for questions at the end. I've really focused here on the creative sector piece of this, but I'm going to pass it over to Patti Komline from Downs Rachlin Martin, who's going to give an overview of the context we'll be working in the 2026 legislative session. So Patti, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Susan. And Deirdre's going to be sharing my slide deck. I am screen share disabled. Okay, the next screen, please, Deirdre. Thank you. I'm going to be providing a broad preview on the big state house issues that indirectly impacts the work that you all do. So as a reminder, they reconvene Tuesday, January 6th. As Susan had said, it's the second year of biennium, which means they hit the ground running. It's like no time passed. It was like a weekend, and they come back. And they have to run pretty hard because at the end of the session, any bills that haven't passed are scrapped and they have to start over the next year. So there's a pretty hard push as they begin the second year. And as a reminder, the governor still has a veto-proof the margin. We had the largest red wave in the country last election cycle. That is attributed mainly to our property taxes going up. And there was this clean heat standard, I don't know if you heard about, which was going to increase taxes on fuel. And people reacted by voting for people with reputations for being more fiscally conservative, giving the governor the numbers he needs to prevail whenever he uses his veto pen. As a backdrop, Vermont's unemployment remains the nation's lowest. As of June of 2025, you can see there, it was at 2.6%, which is great if you're looking for a job, not so good if you're looking to hire people. So there's a tough challenge in hiring workforce, as you are all probably very aware. Okay, the next slide, please, Deirdre. So education, to recap 2025, For the second year in a row, the governor, supported by the legislature, did a property tax buy down. They provided last year $118 million to keep the increase of property taxes at an average of 1.1%. They would have been possibly 15, maybe a little bit lower than that, but that's the second year in a row that we've constrained those increases kind of artificially. The legislature tried, I'm sure you read the paper about, or read the news about how they we're trying to do this mammoth job of education transformation, and it is a huge job. And every time they earnestly looked at one issue, it opened up the door to a lot of other things. The hottest issue was these mapping, redistricting, right? They would redistrict. The governor wanted 5 different districts in the state. The legislature felt there needed to be more. These districts would make decisions for that entire district, which is pretty controversial. So they put this to a task force to work on, and they came back a few weeks ago. You may have read the paper or read the governor criticizing them for saying, we're not sure this would actually save money. We think this is going to upend things and just be too controversial. And we want to give people the incentives, or districts the incentives, to merge on their own. And I think that actually gives space for looking at the things that actually do drive up costs, which they're really not talking about. So all our talking points were about nothing can start without redistricting maps, because those are the foundations for all change. Without that, it's really interesting, but they can still talk about a foundation formula, how they fund the schools. They can talk about incentives. We have the lowest student or staff student ratio in the country. We have incredibly high healthcare rates for staff in schools. It's the most generous program in the state, far more so than the state employees. Nobody's really talking. They acknowledge that, but they don't really talk about that as a cost driver. So those are things they can talk about. One thing that's getting a lot of attention is career tech ed, and everybody is very supportive in supporting and growing CTEs, they call them. So I feel like there's an opportunity there for all of you, because I know theater. I know Patricia Hannaford Center, who I work for, has a very active theater CTE program, and I think there's opportunities there for the arts to grow within CTEs. One thing that they talked about in how to pay for education is, they pay for it with a non-residential or non-homestead rate and the homestead rate. They've broken that up into the residential, and then they're going to have a second homeowner tax rate, and they're going to consider significantly increasing taxes on second homeowners. But we want to look to try and keep everything as tight for the non-res rate as we can, as they're looking to, because it can be punitive and going after the businesses and over the residential. So we watch that. So the next slide, please. So I am not going to go into a lot of detail on housing and permitting, but suffice it to say, there have been things that have been done to make things better. Not fast enough, and I know housing affects all of us and your employees, and even all of us as individuals. But there's a program that just passed, a financing program last year called CHIP. It operates like a TIF program, but it funds infrastructure to lower the costs on buildings or on housing. So that comes into effect this January. They had all the rules and guidelines being drafted, and so that will start. There's been expanded funding for retail and rehab. They call it the missing middle housing. So there has been work. It's not enough, but it takes time. And also the cost of raw materials is so expensive. I know 2 years ago, we worked with home builders to build a 1,200 square foot house with average materials. It was $420,000. So part of our housing problem is it used to be more expensive to buy a pre-built house than to build a house, and now that's shifted, and so there's no incentive for people to be building houses, and that is not just a problem in Vermont. It's definitely a New England problem. An interesting thing, just for you to know, there's this mapping under Act 250. They call it Tier 3, where they did some conservation land mapping that is incredibly broad. And if you have land on your property, and you want to build like a shed that's 50 feet from your house, that's 250 square feet or more, it could land you in Act 250. So that has really inflamed the Rural Caucus, which is a bipartisan group of legislators. And there's going to be a lot, you may read about that. And I'm just mentioning it because if any of you have that kind of concern for yourselves. You might want to follow that in the news. The next slide, please, Deirdre. Healthcare. There are 3 bills that I'll spare you the details of. I'm happy to talk to anybody offline in more detail about what these bills did that the legislature passed. Reference-based pricing, global budgeting, outpatient drug caps. That's for hospitals. That was a bill, the 3rd one that Blue Cross Blue Shield asked for. There's a real concern that Blue Cross Blue Shield could become insolvent in Vermont, and the legislature was working to figure that out. And this was a bill they had asked for that will constrain the rates that hospitals can charge for these drugs. And we are seeing already some rates coming down for instance, teachers' healthcare that only went up this year or projected to go up 7.5%. And I say only in quotes, but that is because of this. But, wherever you're going to constrain spending or the costs for all of us with our insurance, it then constrains the hospital significantly. So there is that. We're going to see some fallout from that. For this year, these 3 bills will go into effect. They're going to be monitoring them and making tweaks where they need to. But also the legislature is probably going to have to look at, what we're all seeing in the news about, the cuts to the ACA, the Affordable Care Act subsidies, and the horrors that we're hearing about people's healthcare plans and what's going to happen, quadrupling. And if you're on the exchange and your plan is going to quadruple and you're healthy, you may, and you're younger, you may drop your insurance, or you may be forced to because you can't afford it. What that does then, the people who are unhealthy are going to be staying on the exchange. That's going to just drive up rates for everybody. So this is in crisis mode, and we'll be seeing much more about that. The healthcare committee in the House is not they're smart, diligent people, but they don't have a lot of historical knowledge. They're fairly new in their roles. So I think that they're going to be challenged in trying to figure out what to do to mitigate what's happening at the federal level, like we all are in so many ways. The next slide, please. So I just put this up here as a reminder. Childcare financing did pass last year. You're paying a payroll contribution of 0.44%. There's a split between the employee and employer. I'm just putting that up there just in case you're not aware of it and you forgot to do it, you know to do that. And also the last year family leave expansion for parental and family leave. There are more categories under there. You might want to take a look at that to make sure you're compliant with the new law. The next slide, please. And data privacy was a pretty hot issue a couple of years ago. And Governor vetoed the bill and he was sustained. Last year, the Senate passed a bill that was more what's being called business friendly. It also had carve-outs for nonprofits. That bill now is over in the House where it's expected that they're going to pile up a lot more on that. It's just something we follow for all of you so you can be aware of and make sure that you're compliant as they go forward. It will probably impact the larger members rather than the smaller ones. It's about how you maintain and share data on individuals. Next slide, please. And I just want to, this syncs well with Susan, what you were just talking about. You all do a great job advocating in the State House. And when you're reaching out and you're talking to legislators, the things that we always think about in our discussions, and as you see here, how can the arts, education, creative skills inform workforce discussions? They really focus on workforce. What role can the cultural facilities play in the housing and downtown redevelopment? And we continue, as you can individually with your local legislators, to educate legislators on the value of the arts and nonprofit organizations. And I can just, right now, more than ever, I think the value of bringing community together when we're all so aware of how everybody's in their own corners and things that we can do to build those bridges and get people talking to each other who unfortunately now don't talk. It's especially coming off of Thanksgiving. I'm more aware of that than ever. It's really important to do that. And you provide a really valuable resource and you've all done a great job advocating for that. Legislators do value you all and it's great work and just continue on. And that is it for me, Susan. Back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patti. And I should have started by saying that Patti's not just any lobbyist from DRM, but she's our lobbyist from DRM. And it has been wonderful working with Patti over the past few years and her team to really make sure that the creative sector is involved in every everything going on. There are lots of ways that our work can intersect and does intersect with the conversations that are happening in the State House. And Patti and her team are really monitoring what's happening in there to ensure that we know when we should be in the room for part of the discussion. And we really appreciate all of that work. So we do have a few minutes for questions. If you have one, you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand. There's not too many of us. You can just unmute and say it too. Maybe don't shout over each other. Or do. Let's make it exciting. While you're thinking about your great questions, I'll just bring up Freeman Stein's question comment in the chat about freedom of expression. Thanks, Christopher, for tackling some of that too. At the Arts Council, I can say we really care deeply about artistic freedom and the ability for people to express themselves. That's really built into how we make our decisions and support our partners. One of the things that has come up many times since January 20th of this year is really the importance for organizations and artists and creatives to keep doing the work that they are doing and to really understand what the difference between the fear that is out there and actually being required to change. And as you've heard a lot of us say this morning, I feel very lucky to live in Vermont. We have incredible support from our Attorney General, who has put out many statements about how to respond, react, or not to presidential directives over the past year. So those are resources that we have been directing people to. And again, we've said this many times, and I'll keep saying it, that all of our jobs are to keep focused on the work that we're doing. No one is telling us not to do it. The limits on freedom of expression in Vermont are I have colleagues from across the country who are facing this at a much different level than we are in Vermont. And we really value the work that everyone is doing to continue using our voices to talk about the world, talk about and create the world we want to see together too. Are there questions, comments, thoughts from the audience?
I'll just say thank you for all the work that you're doing and keeping everybody posted and on the same page about like the creative sector and everything. This is like my first job with a nonprofit in the arts sector, so this is a good jumping off point for me and getting to see what people are doing across the state in different ways.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. And Erin, can you say who you work with?
Yeah, I work with SIBA, which is the South End Art and Business Association in Burlington, and we just moved into a new space, which used to be a music venue, and we're kind of shaping up how we want to turn that into a cultural art center across like music and art and community gatherings. So this is a helpful session for me to attend.
That's great. Thank you. Nicolette.
Hi, Susan. I'm Nikki Clark. I used to have your job many, many years ago. And I've moved back to the state and have joined both the two indivisible groups in Burlington and surrounding Burlington and the Champlain Valley Indivisible. I see a couple familiar faces here as well. And one of the things that we are working on is trying to get having the cultural community come together and with others to be able to have people demonstrate their artistic talents, if you will, but in the cause of us trying to help with our democracy work. And so one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is how to find artists from around the state who might want to participate in a musical, concert as, part of a gathering of indivisible groups, or even protests alongside the road. And so I would just love to be able to figure out a sort of more systematic way to try to find such people in our hills and valleys across the state.
That's great. Thank you. Great to see you. I think all of our organizations, as long as we are encouraging people to participate in nonpartisan activity, that is an important role for all of our agencies, is to help spread the word about that. If folks on this call want to connect, maybe you can put your email in the chat or a way to contact you, and then folks can get in touch. And I'll also say that we have a let's see, we have a resource. This is called Creative Ground, which many of you maybe know about. It's an artist database across New England. And while I don't think there's a checkbox for like politically active on there, like that is a great way to, oh, see, it's already happening in the chat. Jason wants to get involved. We love it.
All right.
There is you can look by town, you can look by county, you can for artists who have registered. And if you are an artist on this call and have not created a profile on Creative Ground yet, it's not too late to do that too.
All right. I've not done the spacing right on my email, but that's what it is, nicolettebc@gmail.com. So thank you.
Thank you. Pat.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people to be active with their local downtown development group and their chamber, because I'm running the new Bellows Falls Historical Society Museum, and we also have an art gallery down there, but we're included in the bingo that the BIFTA is putting out. So we have a square on the bingo cards because I've gotten involved and been volunteering with them. So you need to make sure that you're aware of all the other organizations in your community.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Pat. Thank you. Yes, for the Vermont has a designated downtown and designated village program, and all of those designated downtowns have in kind of independent nonprofits that work with their towns and the downtown organizations. So maybe Montpelier Alive is in Montpelier, Downtown Brattleboro Alliance is in Brattleboro. There's ones all across the state. So if you are not connected with the one in your region, please do get connected with them. They're great to work with. Many of them are involved with the Creative Network. And as Pat said, it's a great way to make sure your organizations are part of the work they are doing to drive people into all of our downtowns as well. Kevin.
Hi, all. Thanks so much for hosting this session, Susan and team over at VAC. I wanted to ask about the ongoing efforts to get a film database here and what we can do to get involved. As I think we're the only state in the production record in LA that does not have a contact number or resources for outside producers to get involved here in Vermont. And that's we're missing a huge cross section of income for the state. So I just wanted to know where we're at with that. We do have some research. I previously sat on the Vermont Production Council, and also the Film Commission had worked with them when we actually had one. So have a bunch of resources that can help with the advocacy side of that. But whether we have an actual proposal that's going in or any legislation and how we can get involved with advocacy there.
Yeah, so this is something to recap on the history of this in Vermont, there have actually been 2 film commissions over time in the state. Both of them were really one of our challenges with having a film commissions are usually in other states focused on drawing film production to the state. They get tax credits to work there, and then those productions happen and they support the local economy. We happen to be located between states with extensive tax credits of New York, Massachusetts, and Quebec, which is not a state. I know it's a province in a different country, but they have even more film production credits in Quebec. So the focus on this over the past couple of years in the legislature has been really working with them to convince them that there should be funding available, not to create another film commission, but instead to focus on the workforce side of film production in the state. We know that some people do want to film here, and the research that actually drew us to not actually advocate for a new film commission, but instead a more targeted approach came out of a film legislative group that was identified. I think someone from our team can tell me the year, 2021, I think 2022 was the film film group that met, and they really identified what are the key things that we should focus on from state support that would develop the industry. And it all kept coming back to making it just a little bit easier for people who want to film here to work here. And that really focused on having a database. So Vermont Production Collective has been our real partners in this. I put their link in the chat. I see Brian Carroll is on the call here, who worked with the Production Collective to develop a kind of a test version of this called Film in Vermont. So that's up there now. You can check it out. But what we have asked the legislature for the past 2 years is a proposal for funding that would support having a database that was linked with all of the national databases for film to really put us on the map in that way. We do have broad support in the legislature for this. I would say I got a lot of positive feedback. We're testifying committees. People are always saying how great it is. We were this is such inside baseball, but for multiple years in a row, we were the top thing recommended from the House Commerce Committee to be funded as part of an economic development bill. But as we hear a lot and we see the Vermont legislature is tackling some really big issues, and the funding is always the thing. So even though there is, lots of evidence that funding these projects will result in future economic growth for the state, in the immediate world, sometimes it is more challenging to convince the legislature to spend money on things that they're not going to see that return on like today. So there is momentum around this. This will be the third year we're asking for funding for this, and we're hoping that as things move forward, it takes a long time to get sustained funding from the legislature. So that's kind of a winding way to say that there is support, but we'll keep at it, asking again for a third year. And we're looking for people who are interested in getting involved in that too. So if you want to reach out, Kevin, we would be glad to talk to you about getting you in there with us. And if you also, there's probably other Vermont Production Collective people in here too. Brian put his link in the chat, or his email in the chat too, who's a great person to contact. Thanks, Brian. And yes, thank you, Amy. The Film Legislative Study Group was 2022, which seems like, think of all the things that have happened since 2022. All right, well, thanks everyone for your great questions and insight. Thank you to Morgan and Steve and Christopher and Patti for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. And we're really looking forward to the legislative session ahead. We know that our work here we're never going to stop telling people how important it is to support the arts and culture in our state, because it's so valuable to do it. So I appreciate working in partnership with all of you, and thanks for everything that you do. And hopefully we'll be in touch soon with more details about how to stay involved. Thanks, everyone.